Hey guys, how are you? I hope you're all doing very well. This afternoon I'm going to be doing another movie review, so I hope you find this one interesting. This movie is a horror comedy from the USA, English language, released in the year 2016, directed by Jim Hosking, and this film is called The Greasy Strangler. So The Greasy Strangler is about this father and son who work as tour guides. Their business is called walk tours of disco era. So basically, musicians who specialise in disco, say for example Bee Gees, they basically take this group of tourists, they go through the city and they show where these pioneers of disco music grew up, where they worked, and there's no real evidence to suggest what they're saying is truth. So it's a very dodgy business, but it's a business that's getting the money nonetheless. So it's a father and son duo that actually love each other, but then things are going to be complicated when a woman comes into their lives. Now the woman takes a liking to the son, which ultimately causes a lot of jealousy within the father, and then the father starts to like this woman, and the woman starts to like the father. So there's a love triangle that threatens to blow up everything that this father and son had. And to add further complications, there's also a serial killer going around town, killing people at will, called the Greasy Strangler. So the police can't really stop him. No one has any clues as to who this guy is, but this young man starts to believe that his father could be this killer. So he has to set out to try and stop him himself, but whether or not he really is the killer or if he just wants his father out of the picture is something you're going to have to find out for yourself, because that's as far as I'm going with my synopsis. Now my thoughts on The Greasy Strangler. This is definitely a movie that is very reminiscent of the early works of John Waters and also the French DJ Quentin Dupieux, or however you pronounce his name. He was the guy responsible for the outrageous film called Rubber, which is about a killer car tyre. He also made a whole host of other films that were just so crazy that it really takes you to a different world. It's a completely different situation as you get into a standard story. So the thing I liked about Greasy Strangler is that it really was over the top. It really was creative in what it was trying to do. It doesn't always work, but at least this director was trying to make something very wacky. It was very quirky. I thought the production levels in this film were quite decent. I thought cinematography was very quirky. I thought the music was very quirky as well. And I actually really liked the music. I thought it really got into the mood of the outrageous sort of caricature world that this movie was set in. And so you've got all these grotesque situations. This is an incredibly provocative film. This is a movie that is not afraid to stick its middle finger up to political correctness. So if you are a very sensitive PC type of person, this movie is not going to be for you, because you're probably going to turn this movie off within 10 minutes, because it does have a lot of disgusting humour. It has a lot of sexual dialogue that is very explicit. It's got some pretty explicit sex scenes and some sex acts that you will find offensive. It's also got really disgusting moments of grease. There's a lot of grease in this film, and whether it's grease put on the food or the greasy killer that this mysterious figure is, it's just all very disgusting, and it just feels like it's depicting something of a John Waters film, in that you've got these characters who are doing horrible, horrible things, but so far over the top that it feels like it's there just to be provocative. So it's a different style of film, and I think this movie does take a lot of inspiration from those said films that I've just talked about. So I did like that sort of aspect. I did like the fact that some of the dialogue was very funny. If you have a very juvenile sense of humour, then you will appreciate where this goes. There's a lot of fart jokes, there's a lot of penis jokes, there's a lot of full frontal nudity, so you get to see a lot of male genitalia. So once again, that's going to make a lot of people uncomfortable, but if you are comfortable in yourself and it doesn't bother you, you will actually laugh at how far this film actually goes. So it's deeply provocative. It really does promise that, and I thought it really delivered that. Unfortunately, the problem with The Greasy Strangler is that it really is not only paying tribute to the early John Waters, it's trying to imitate it so badly that it's trying too hard to impress the audience. It's trying too hard to be funny. So what you get is a movie that, because it's trying too hard, a lot of the jokes don't work, is because they're being replayed over and over and over. And it was funny the first time, but after a while you start to get irritated, and you start to notice that there aren't a lot of jokes in this film, is that it's replaying the same sort of situation many times. And so if the script had a lot more polish on it, that it was actually a much better written film, this could have been a classic. But unfortunately you notice the shortcomings in the dialogue is because it becomes a lot more irritant than it does joyful. And so the movie does come across as very awkward. There are some very awkward situations, but unfortunately the film itself feels very awkward. It doesn't feel very comfortable in what it's trying to do. and it gets lost. And because it gets lost, it feels like a very messy film. The continuity is not very good, and it just takes you to situations where you're not really laughing with it, you're actually laughing at it, and you're actually laughing at how bad it actually feels sometimes. And that to me was the biggest problem, is that's where John Waters really succeeds, in that he never creates that atmosphere that you actually feel like you're getting irritated by it. You actually feel like you can absorb yourself into this crazy world, and you're actually getting a lot of entertainment out of it. But with Greasy Strangler, I thought this actually became a little bit boring, and I thought the entertainment value wasn't really that present after you get used to the fact that this is a very crazy world. Yes, there are a lot of poop jokes, there are a lot of very explicit sexual dialogue sort of jokes, but after a while you start to want a lot more, and unfortunately Greasy Strangler really can't deliver that. There was a fairly good ending. I thought the ending was fairly touching in a very, very disturbing way, but unfortunately there's not enough character development there to really prove something interesting, as opposed to overlook the shortcomings of the film. So what I mean by that is that if the script was really bad, maybe the characters could have been interesting enough to really invest your time in, and maybe it could have had a bit of a social commentary, because films of Quentin Dupieux, especially Rubber, that was a crazy film, but it was a very smart film at the same time, because it was as a social commentary on what we as viewers of films want. But this movie doesn't have that. It doesn't have any underlying quality that really excuses the fact that this movie does have more shortcomings than it does positives. So that was my biggest problem with The Greasy Strangler. I will say that there are some very bizarre scenes that make it worth viewing, but if you want something that is going to stick in the memory, that is more in depth as opposed to something very juvenile and very shallow, then this is definitely not for you. It is a movie that I can see a lot of people not liking. As for me, I didn't hate the film, but I thought it could have been a lot better. I appreciate it for trying to stick the middle finger up at the PC crowd, but unfortunately it just doesn't quite stick all the way. So overall, for The Greasy Strangler, I'm only going to give this one 1.5 stars. Definitely only recommended for a very acquired taste. Alright guys, that's it for my review. Hope you enjoyed it. Till next time, keep watching movies, and I'll see you later. Bye.